Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Profiles in Risk. I am your host, Nick Lamparelli. As I was just telling my guest, Dom Vogel, there's no better way to end a long week, a late Friday, than by talking about cyber insurance. There's no better way to end that week. So I am very pleased to have as my guest DOMINIC Vogel. Dom is the founder and chief strategist at Cyber.sc. And as the name suggests, Cyber.sc is a cybersecurity company providing security advisory services to startups, investors, and SMEs. And Dom is based in the beautiful city of Vancouver, British Columbia. How are you?
I'm doing well. And like you said there, I think this is a great bookend for a very long week.
Yes, we can finish this and then head off to whatever drink is waiting for us.
That's right.
Okay. Again, as we were talking before I hit the record button, not often I get to have a conversation where I really feel like I don't know the topic and I'm uncomfortable about it. I feel like I can't talk intelligently. We know the exposure of cyber is in the news constantly. Capital One just had a giant breach. There's probably more days that have cyber news than don't have cyber news. So this is a fantastic way for me to get educated on this topic as well. So let's start off the way we always start off, Dom, with an elevator pitch. What is Cyber.sc? Cyber.sc.
Well, getting into the elevator. So the Cyber.sc was born out of my idea to be able to provide cybersecurity leadership services to the small and mid-sized organizations which have traditionally been chronically underserved or overpriced in terms of when cybersecurity advisors or consultants try to work with them. So the company actually was formed 4 summers ago this year. This is our 4th year of existence. And
congratulations.
Thank you. The main point of it, again, is to provide that guidance to whether it be business owners, whether it be CEOs, people in charge of operations, being able to provide them with that pragmatic and practical guidance that they can't find anywhere else. So many of our clients come to us after saying, "Oh, we reached out to Deloitte, KPMG, one of the big 4, and basically they were priced out of being able to get good cybersecurity guidance." So that's why we really focus on the underserved market to provide the guidance that they need. And in this day and age, every single organization, big or small, needs to deal with cyber risk.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that. What are the different types? What sort of guidance do all of these companies need help on?
That's a really good question. So, especially when we're looking for small and mid-sized organizations, one of the sort of the greatest myths or misconceptions that we run into is that they view cybersecurity as being just a IT problem. They say, "You know what? We have an IT guy who handles that," or "Our IT managed service provider handles that. You know, we're good." But what they're missing on that piece there is the risk perspective. They're viewing it through a technological lens. And yes, there's a technical component to it, but more importantly, when we're talking about if there was to be a data breach at your organization, your customers, your clients, other people in companies in your supply chain, they're not going to hold your IT guy at fault, or they're not going to hold your IT managed service provider at fault. It's your organization. So the accountability and responsibility has to fall on the organization. So they need to take ownership of that and realize they need to do a better job overseeing how cybersecurity and cyber risk is dealt with within their organization.
Yeah. So to me, cyber is just like property insurance.
Yes.
It's exactly the same, except there's an arsonist outside.
Yes, that's right.
there's a ninja arsonist outside, and that makes it really complicated because there's a human being that's actively trying to cause harm in a very nefarious and sinister way, but also in a discreet way.
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing which I've always liked about cybersecurity is that yes, there's the outside threat, which often gets a lot of the media play and a lot of the attention. And yeah, absolutely. Organized cybercrime is a huge problem, and organizations need to have strategies with how to deal with that. But often what's missed, especially in this day and age, is that there's a key or very compelling business reason to be able to do cybersecurity, or to be able to demonstrate that you have a cybersecurity program, especially with small and mid-sized organizations. So most smaller organizations, they have a service or software or platform or what have you. They're generally selling into a larger upstream for larger organizations. Now, larger enterprise organizations, they are now doing more extreme, what I refer to as cyber risk due diligence, in which if any organization is going to be able to provide services or what have you to their organization, those companies need to be able to demonstrate very clear cybersecurity capabilities. I'll take out my history map here and say this is all mapped back to the Target breach from yesteryear, when Target experienced that massive data breach. What was core to that was that it wasn't Target's internal network which was compromised. It was a very small HVAC vendor which they relied on to manage the HVAC services for their stores, for many of their stores. That company was compromised, and through there, the bad guys were able to get into Target's network. Target also was. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
that honestly, that makes it even worse.
Oh no, absolutely.
Because now it's not like you can do. Not only do you need to worry about your cybersecurity, you need to worry about cybersecurity of absolutely every stakeholder.
Exactly.
To deal with.
Exactly, and again, through that lens for small and mid-sized businesses, why they should really worry. Yes, all the big stories about Capital One, Target, Staples, what have you, Marriott, the big companies, they will survive. But that HVAC vendor that dealt with Target, they're gone. They no longer exist. That's why it's paradoxically, it's even more important for small and mid-sized businesses to get cybersecurity right. Literally, their very business, their livelihood depends on it. The big guys, they'll survive. Yeah, their start price might go up or down, but in the long run, they'll be fine. But that's why what we're seeing now is this trickle-down effect, which the large companies are taking it very, very seriously. And now what's sort of feeling the pinch there is the small and mid-sized organizations. So there's sort of that external threat to worry about, but also that internal business risk to worry about as well.
So you've clarified one thing. So for the big companies, a cyber breach, a cyber security incident is a fireable offense, and there could be, there are some financial ramifications. Yeah. But for the small and mid-sized business, it's an existential threat.
Yes, exactly. It very much threatens the existence of the business, and that's why it's so important to not just view, especially if you're a small and mid-sized business, to just say, "Oh, our IT guy handles that." Do you really want that, the 50-year-old IT guy that you really don't know much about to be ultimately responsible for what happens within the organization? Again, operationally, that person knows what they're doing, but cybersecurity is so much more than just operations. There is that, like I said, dealing with it from a strategic risk perspective. You need to have executive presence and oversight on that.
Yeah. Let's talk about that HVAC company. I don't know how much you know about the specifics of it, but let's talk about what they could have done.
Yeah.
What should they have done? What is a reasonable set? I mean, it's similar to how you can't expect a small business to overinsure. They just don't have the capital to be able to do that. So it's managing the trade-off of the risks of, hey, at some point I have to take on some of the risk because I can't just be spending all of my money in insurance. Yeah. You can't be spending all of your money in cybersecurity either. You have a business to run. Yeah. So what are the low-hanging fruits? For that HVAC company or companies like that, which I think a lot of the audience here listening, whether they be agencies or brokerages or small insurance companies, probably fit that bill. What should they have done?
Yeah, I know, absolutely, and I think there's a lot of best practices end up coming out of that. And that's one of the good things that happens with data breaches is that over time, we're getting better and better at what we need to do. So for the small organization, what they need to do better is, one was having greater staff awareness around various cyber threats or online scams. So what happened in that case was that HVAC vendor got targeted by various social engineering and phishing attempts, and something happened there in which they were able to gain credentialed access to that HVAC company. And then within that company, they didn't have any, it very, let's put it this way, they had very limited cybersecurity capabilities in terms of how access was controlled, in terms of the internal network there, in which if you had access to maybe one application, you could access the entire internal network there, and then be able to from there jump to target internal network. One of the core principles of cybersecurity is being able to have what's referred to as privilege of least access, in which people should only have access to what they need and nothing else. That way, if that access is compromised, it's not like they suddenly have God access to everything. And that's often what happens with a lot of small organizations, in which if you let's say you have access to a company's network, you can access everything. You can access the CEO's folder, you can access HR records. Everything is completely open and accessible. So I would say that's one of the core lessons that came out of that one, is to really make sure, if you're a small and mid-sized organization, really have an attempt to really try and restrict that access. So someone in accounts payable only is able to access the stuff that they need to do their job. People in HR only have access to do what they need to do in HR, and no one other than the CEO or other people in the C-suite should be able to access like a C-suite folder, as a high-level example.
Yeah. How about like technologies such as Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, OneDrive? A lot of companies are leaning towards outsourcing a lot of their networking function to those cloud-based systems. How have they fared in these types of things? It seems, because I use Google Drive.
Yep.
I have to. I think they do a fairly good job of reminding me who has access to a particular folder, and even within a folder, I can segregate access. I can give access to a person for a specific file within a specific folder. So I'm sort of wondering, have there been any issues with network access to one of those cloud-based systems?
Yeah, no, I think one of the great things about those broader cloud storage capabilities or applications is that it's allowed for greater flexibility, and inherently they do have better security controls than if a small organization was trying to build their own internal file server, as an example. So I mean, if you're able to harness that, you can do that in a much more secure fashion. The problem is that a lot of organizations, they won't even buy an enterprise or business version of that. They'll just leverage the consumer version. And if you're just leveraging a consumer version, you're not getting that same level of security capabilities if you were taking advantage of using Box.com as an example, leveraging sort of their business or enterprise version in order to get additional access controls. So I mean, the security capabilities are there, and they're absolutely fantastic. The problem is that very few businesses take advantage of them, and that's, again, I would say, is part of an awareness problem. These are great platforms, but if you're not taking the time to go through them and secure them according to some level of best practice, you're wasting it. It's sort of being given like this really fancy home security system and not setting it up. The capabilities are there, but unless you take the time to set it up, what's the point?
Yeah, it's funny because I was listening to a webinar yesterday. The gentleman delivering the webinar was talking about water sensors, and he was like, "I have one. It's in a box. It's in my garage. So I'm one of those people that's like, I'm thinking about it, but it hasn't been an urgent thing to do."
Right.
So like you said, like if you almost have to light a fire under your ass to take these things seriously.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and particularly with small and mid-sized businesses, it often requires adverse events, so like a security incident, before they start taking it seriously. And that's often when clients reach out to us, is after something bad has happened. Obviously we try to preach the proactive message, in which it's better to do it now before something bad happens. But I guess human psychology being what it is, even if you look at other aspects of human life, if someone that has a healthy or unhealthy lifestyle, they generally won't change it until they have a heart attack or something else. They won't listen to the doctor. The doctor says, you ought to lose some weight. They'll just tell the doctor, well, piss off, I'm still healthy. And then it's human psychology. There's a subset which will act proactively, but generally speaking, there's a larger subset which needs an adverse event in order to compel them to some level of change.
Sure. Ransom.
Another great topic.
I'm still confused how exactly that happens, and how did they get in?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, I'm always surprised at the amount of ransom. Like, and how do you know, like, that they haven't been able to create some sort of extra backdoor where they can't do it again? How does that whole cybersecurity how does the security for that cyber element collapse, and how does that work? What do you know about that?
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, when we're speaking of specific external threats, ransomware is the #1 threat for small and mid-sized businesses. And one of the things I always like to start off with when we're talking about ransomware is understanding that it's an economic game. Ransomware is run by organized criminals, and believe it or not, these organized crime groups and syndicates, they're incredibly smart, and what they focus on is ROI, a return on investment. This isn't all just willy-nilly or some kid with a hoodie in his mother's basement. That's what's part of the problem, is that a lot of people don't understand that that this is run by very well-run organized crime organizations, and it's cybercrime as a whole has surpassed the drug trade as being one of the that's the go-to crime right now in the world. And the reason is that it's safer. You don't always have to carry a gun. You're not very likely to get shot, and you can do it wherever you are in the world. You could be in a beach somewhere in South America. You could be in the middle of the Pacific. It doesn't matter. You can perpetrate those crimes wherever you wish to perpetrate them. And you can be anywhere in the world. So when we're talking about ransomware, it's a really interesting evolution, which it used to just be focused on personal computers. That was sort of the first iteration. But now you don't really see ransomware on home computers. It's very much become a business, because now they're focused primarily on small and mid-sized businesses. The #1 reason why they focus on those organizations is that those companies tend to not have mature data backup capabilities. Ransomware for a relatively large organization or mature organization, it's literally it's a nuisance. It's a pain in the ass, but it won't bring the company down to its knees. Generally speaking, there have been some instances with larger organizations that have really been hit, but generally speaking, the companies that really feel the brunt of this is the small and mid-sized businesses, because they don't have data backups. If a computer gets locked up with ransomware, and I'll explain how that happens in a second, but if one computer gets locked up and it spreads to the rest of their network, and all the systems get locked up, the businesses don't know what to do. They don't have what's referred to as an off-site data backup to be able to restore their systems and continue business anew. They're, for lack of a better term, they're screwed. And the cyber criminals know this, and that's why they are very clever with the pricing with the ransomware, in which they'll put in a ransom in which they know the smaller mid-sized business will be more compelled to pay for it, because they know it'll likely be cheaper to pay the ransom than it is to try and retroactively recover that data, pay for on-site forensics to recover it, to build in a new data backup. And I kid you not, there are some businesses that I know who are there, from their risk tolerance perspective, they'd rather keep paying the ransom rather than invest in a proper data backup architecture. It pains me to say that, and as a security professional, it pushes me to the edge of wanting to barf. But
that's so disappointing.
It is disappointing, but that's what cyber criminals are so good at pinpointing and understanding, that at the end of the day, many business leaders or owners, all they focus on is the dollars and cents, and in some cases, rightly so. So they know if we can price this just accordingly, this ends up being a recurring revenue stream for them. And as backwards as that sounds, when you look at it from an economic point of view, it's actually quite brilliant. And
So how does it happen? Like,
yes,
how does it keep happening? It's
yeah.
I'm just
The
amazing.
there's a lot of stories. I'll start with one story, and then I'll dive into the sort of a little more technical perspective as to why it happens. But one of the economic reasons, again, is in terms of why it's successful, is that if someone pays the ransom, cyber criminals, generally speaking, they'll allow it to be unlocked. You regain access to your systems. A lot of people will say, "Oh, well, how do we know? I mean, if we pay the
Mhm.
ransom, that they won't they'll just keep the money." And it's because, well, if you do that, that means in the future you likely won't pay the money again. They want people to keep paying and paying and paying and paying, and they've actually invested a lot of money in being able to, and by they I mean the cyber criminals, in order to make paying the ransom as easy as possible. There was they weren't a client of ours, but through a colleague of mine, one of a client that he knew. It was an accounting firm, small accounting firm. They got hit by ransom, and they weren't sure how to pay, because generally it's through cryptocurrency that you have to pay the ransom. And this accounting firm, it was generally older people. They were like, "What's cryptocurrency? How do we do that?" And in the ransom note, there was a support number. They called the number, and they were walked through how to do it. And I actually had an opportunity to chat with someone at this accounting firm, and I said, "Well, what was your experience like with the support there?" And they said, "Oh, they were just wonderful to deal with. They were so pleasant. They were very courteous in terms of explaining the steps." And they then later said to me, they said, "It's a shame that Canada Revenue, which is sort of the Canadian equivalent of the IRS, that their phone support isn't as good as the people at giving the ransom." So it was funny because they had a positive experience in paying the ransom. So in terms of the technical reason why ransomware is possible, again, it's preying on the fact that many businesses do not keep their computers, so their operating systems, the applications, up to date with security patches. Security patches are basically like getting almost like your annual flu shot or different vaccines. You need to update your applications as various security updates get released, and most small and mid-sized businesses suck at doing that. And that's basically where ransomware takes advantage, in which if someone goes to the wrong website and clicks a link, or if they click a link or an attachment in a in a phishing email, basically what happens is there's a technical exploit which goes into the computer, tries to take advantage of that vulnerability or that weakness, which should have been addressed by that security patch. But like I said, with most organizations, small businesses, they don't patch that. And then there's basically some malicious code which comes up online, and then is able to lock down the machine. It encrypts the hard drive, and then what it does, it tries to do that on other laptops, other workstations in that company network as well.
Wow. I'm struggling to even follow up with a question because I'm just like, so even if a criminal enterprise unlocks it,
Yes.
how do you not know that there's other malicious code that's
Yeah.
been put in there, almost like a bug that can
Yeah.
kind of pop up again?
Short story, or short answer is that you don't. Generally speaking, how we advise businesses that get hit by ransomware is that if they're in a spot and they get hit by ransomware and they don't have data backups and they need to get access back to that data, they have no choice either to try and manually recreate that data, which is generally not possible. Generally, the only option is to pay that ransom. So as step one. Step two is, as soon as you pay that ransom and you've regained access to your data and to your network, you have to spend money right then and there to address some of those systemic weaknesses. And like I said, generally speaking, is that they don't have a robust or mature data backup capability. Number one. Number two, they are generally lacking with keeping their laptops, their workstations, desktops updated with updated security patches. So making sure that they have a robust program to do that. Number two. And number three is, generally speaking, investing in more mature cybersecurity technologies. So whether that be like a next generation firewall, intrusion detection systems. Generally speaking, a lot of these organizations will have very lax security controls. They may be running, they'll say, oh, we've often seen this with clients. They'll say, oh, we have antivirus, and I'll take a look at the antivirus, and it was last updated 3 years ago. And an antivirus program which was last updated 3 years ago is
Worthless.
Useless. It's absolutely worthless. It's a false sense of security. So generally speaking, we say take whatever money that same amount of money that you invested in paying the ransom, take that same amount, double it, and invest that in improving your security posture. It's all about not being the low-hanging fruit. Everyone talks about cyber criminals being sophisticated and all that stuff. That's not true. What they're doing is taking advantage of the low-hanging fruit. And by low-hanging fruit, I mean organizations which are making it just crazy easy for criminals to break in and to perpetrate crimes like ransomware. Ransomware, by just taking your security game from zero up just a little bit, your threat being hit by ransomware or being greatly impacted by ransomware all but disappears. It's all about just taking us 1 or 2 steps up to get some incremental risk reduction gains, and then cyber criminals go elsewhere. There's unfortunately no shortage of organizations that do cybersecurity poorly.
Have any of these criminals been caught?
It's
shocking, right? They had a support number.
Yeah.
Can't the FBI trace these things? I know the crypto thing would be really difficult.
Yeah.
With between IP addresses and support lines.
It's generally speaking, the attribution part of crimes or cybercrime is very hard. It's very different than the physical world, where just over the course of literally thousands of years, humans have had the opportunity to really figure out how to attribute physical crimes. That doesn't exist as much in the cyber realm. One of the main roadblocks to that is that the majority of cyber criminals and those various crime syndicates are based in areas where the US or Canada or the UK as an example, they don't have extradition, they don't have the abilities to be able to extradite criminals from one area and bring them over back to the UK or the US or Canada to be able to hold them accountable or bring them to justice. They're generally in places like Eastern Europe, maybe in Russia, Ukraine, various other parts of the former Soviet bloc. They may be somewhere in South America. They may be somewhere in Asia. It's really hard to attribute who did the crime, and the other thing to make that even more complex is that in the cyber realm you can make it look like the crime is coming from one area when in fact it's coming from somewhere else. It's very easy to hide your tracks compared to the physical world. So the attribution piece is very hard, and that's another reason in which we often say to a lot of our clients, they often ask, who did this? Who did it is irrelevant. The who you should be looking at we've often done this. I'll bring a mirror to a meeting, and I'll say the who you should be worrying about is the person you see in the mirror, and that's you. You're not making strong risk decisions. You're choosing to downplay what cyber risk means to the organization. The who you should be worrying about is yourself, and being able to make better risk decisions to better serve your organization, your customers, and your employees, and your vendors.
Yeah. So I don't think I need to hire someone like you to do cybersecurity for me. I can just buy an insurance policy, right?
Sure. That's another common question we hear as well. If I had a dime for every time I heard that, I would be a very, very rich man. I don't think I would even need to work anymore. It's again back to, I think I mentioned earlier at the beginning, some prevailing myths or common misconceptions. The IT handles that being one, and the other is that can't we just have cyber insurance? Cyber insurance from a big picture perspective, cyber insurance is meant to basically protect or insure against whatever residual risk is left. Cyber insurance doesn't mean you can act like a complete idiot, click on links where the heck you want, not have any cybersecurity controls in place, and just be covered by cyber insurance. That doesn't work like that. That's like, if I have car insurance, that gives me a license to drive like a jackass and just close my eyes and just drive around without paying attention to the laws of the road. No, it's insuring a residual risk there. Cyber insurance is no different. So that's sort of on the business side. The other problem, though, is that a lot of the insurance companies, they're really hot to trot about the whole cyber insurance. Like, that's literally the most amazing thing that's happened to the insurance industry in probably, I don't know, 100 years. It's brand new, and everyone's quick to jump on it. But part of the problem is that they're realizing that organizations will quickly sign on the dotted line if it says they get cyber insurance. But what the real problem is in terms of the exceptions. What does it actually cover? And it varies so much from one insurance provider to another. You have one in which there's literally a million exceptions, and when you go through it, realistically, your cyber insurance covers nothing. Others will have this really short questionnaire and say, oh, we need to know a couple questions here in order to figure out how to provide cyber insurance to you. And again, I always laugh at that, because the people filling that out on the business side, they don't know if they have do you have an up-to-date antivirus? Often they'll write yes, and in practice they don't. So to me, I think there's great opportunity to use cyber insurance as a really powerful risk reduction tool. Again, like I said, for reducing or for managing the residual risk. But right now, there's a lot of misinformation floating around in which people think, and organizations, particularly for small and mid-sized businesses, think that's their get out of free jail card, in which if they get hit by ransomware, it's okay, we're covered, we have cyber insurance. So I think there's a lot of room for opportunity there, but I think there needs to be greater awareness and greater education on both sides. I've run into a lot of cyber insurance brokers who will tout about how amazing their coverage is, and when I take the time to read through the fine print, it says, if malware enters your network because of someone clicking on a link, then you're not covered. And I was like, well,
that's very common.
Yeah. What's the point then? Like, we can only reduce the user risk so much. To me, cyber insurance would help. Again, look at that from a residual risk perspective, and seeing that is laughable. And in terms, the other thing which a lot of businesses don't keep in mind is that when a data breach happens, or I guess ransomware as well, but let's use a data breach example. There's direct costs and there's the indirect costs, and that's often overlooked by a lot of businesses. So by direct costs, I mean the cost to bring on site maybe data forensics, to bring in additional cybersecurity consultants, to pay for maybe credit monitoring for employees or customers who got affected by your data breach. Those are examples of direct costs, and cyber insurance, a lot of policies will cover that. But what people don't think about is the indirect costs. What about now if your brand has lost, or people lose trust in your brand? You may now have a tougher time with customer acquisition. Maybe there's a larger customer churn. Maybe now you're not able to retain customers as long as you were before. Now all of a sudden, indirect costs in which now you're as an organization, you've lost money. Cyber insurance doesn't cover that piece. Again, it's hard to predict that piece, so it shouldn't necessarily be a piece that should be covered, but it's often overlooked, that indirect cost picture, when we're talking about data breaches or security incidents.
It seems to me that cyber insurance for cybersecurity incidents does not make sense in isolation unless there is specific loss control, whether your type of security firm. Like, I just don't see the point in having the insurance at all. It's probably worthless anyways, but it just seems like those two things dovetail so nicely. Like, there needs to be a big push for loss prevention. There needs to be a big push for loss mitigation should a loss occur, and then some sort of financial restitution should there be, like you said, spillage, that the overflow of risk, where you did everything you could, preventing, mitigating.
Yes.
It was a low probability thing. It happened. Now there's some some sort of indemnification of the risk. It seems like they all go hand in hand.
Absolutely, and I think I think it's grossly irresponsible of the broader insurance industry to be handing out cyber insurance willy-nilly. Like, it's one of the biggest, to me right now, cash cows, in which I hear from so many of our clients that cyber insurance is being pushed on them. And to me, the insurance industry should be doing better due diligence before handing out the cyber coverage. The way I look at it, as well, as which if you have a car, as an insurance industry, you're not going to insure a car that doesn't have working brakes, that doesn't have airbags, doesn't have a seat belt. That's a missile. So why would you be insuring an organization or a company that doesn't have just basic cybersecurity capabilities in place?
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, to me, it would be like you write a fire insurance policy, and the building that you're insuring has a firewall, sprinkler system, smoke detectors, connection to fire department. Like, it has all of those things in place so that, hey, we're going to prevent this from happening.
Yes.
Should it happen, we're going to try to minimize the impact. But even if it gets beyond that, we'll still have the fire department and insurance to kind of come in and solve it so that we can survive. It's like a much more mature solution.
That's right. And to me, like I said, when we're talking about risk, there's the inherent risk. And then hopefully you've taken steps like that to mitigate that inherent risk to a manageable or tolerable level. And then you use the insurance piece to insure the residual risk.
Yeah.
That, to me, then, when you do that in that capacity, you're having very effective risk management rather than just blindly relying on insurance. That's not effective risk management.
Sure. So talk to me about, like, what an engagement would look like. What does a cybersecurity firm do? What walk through, like, first steps to ultimately what's the kind of recurring physical, the annual physical?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a bending over?
Yeah. So in terms of how we work with our clients, and we're really focusing on being able to provide the leadership services. We're not coming in and installing antivirus. So typically how it works is, when we engage with a client, we'll go in and what I refer to as sort of baseline their current security posture. So by baseline, that helps us identify sort of what aspects of security they're doing well, what aspects they're completely ignoring, what aspects are just not known. And we're leveraging industry. This is your security posture level here. You're, as an organization, or you should be up here. What are those high risk gaps that should be addressed? And we come up with pragmatic and practical steps and recommendations to be able to achieve those risk reductions. And often with our clients, it's not a matter of having to buy new technology. Generally speaking, most of our clients have fairly decent security technology already in place, because much of that has been operationalized over the past 20 years. What's lacking, though, is that cohesion between the people side, process, and technology. Doing cybersecurity effectively requires all three, and being able to make sure that there's sufficient guidance and oversight from the key decision makers within the organization all the way down. So we're really all about trying to identify the gaps and the risks, and then be able to say, pragmatically, here's, for year one, here's the 2 or 3 steps we need to take. Year 2, here's the next ones we need to take. Year 3, here's the next ones to take. For us, we always tell our clients security is a journey. It's not like upgrading to Windows 10 or upgrading to the latest version of Office or what have you. There is no clear start and end. The beauty of cybersecurity is that it's a journey, and it morphs. When we start with our clients, because we focus with small and mid-sized businesses, they themselves are on a growth journey as well. How you handle cybersecurity as a 50-person company is very different how you handle that as a 100-person company. And that's way more different than if you were a 250-person company or 400-person company. And that's sort of how we get sort of that residual stickiness factor, in which we're that guide with them throughout their journey. I always like to say I'm like Sebastian in The Little Mermaid. I'm your lovable Disney sidekick who guides you through your growth journey. Wherever you go in life, whatever you do as a business, we're there to support you and to secure your business growth.
Yep. You commented on LinkedIn when I was researching you, and we've discussed how for SMEs, how cybersecurity is an existential problem.
Yes.
But you pointed out something else that I think might be that important spark that gets them to act on this stuff. And you talked about how if you're a startup or you're a young company and your plan is to have some sort of successful exit, you'll be compromising yourself. You'll be compromising that exit by not taking cybersecurity seriously. So we're like beyond just the existential part of it, there's a financial implication where you could be really chopping off your hands, or chopping your nose to spite your face type of analogy, by not taking cybersecurity specifically. And can you specifically talk about why a company, a young company that's looking for a potential exit needs to take cybersecurity especially seriously, and why a potential acquisition company might look unfavorably to a company that isn't doing that?
Absolutely. The main driver to that right now is that we're seeing increased what's referred to as cyber risk due diligence in the M&A realm. So when companies or an organization is going to either invest big money in a startup, or if a large organization is looking at doing an M&A with a smaller organization, there's a process called due diligence which happens. So that's maybe looking at operational risk, financial risk, what's the the viability if we were to buy this, what are the financial projections, all sorts of stuff happens. And until recently, that cyber risk component of that was not looked at. But there have been a couple of case studies. One of the more notable ones involved PayPal when they purchased TO Networks, which was actually based here in my hometown of Vancouver. PayPal acquired them for $200-something million. And what they realized over time was that TO Networks, there was an active breach happening within that company. And as a result, they spent some time investigating it, and they quickly realized that it was bad, really bad. And from a cost-benefit perspective, rather than try to fix it, it was more effective to shut down that company. So they basically acquired a company and shut it down
for
so
$250 million.
Yeah. So if you now look at this from the ripple effect factor, large companies now do not want to repeat the same mistake that PayPal made there. That became a watershed moment. So larger organizations and companies that do M&A have started to add cyber risk due diligence as part of that. And by cyber risk due diligence, I mean that they will look extensively at a startup or a small and mid-sized business to see what type of cybersecurity capabilities or program they have in place. Again, there's various industry frameworks that they use for doing that. But if they go into an organization and they see that their cybersecurity is not taken seriously there, they'll just go somewhere else. And think about it this way: if there's company A and company B, or startup A and startup B, and you both offer similar services, and one is taking cybersecurity seriously and the other is not, right now, my money's on company B being successfully bought out. Company A is screwed. So there are clear business reasons. If the external existential threats don't scare the hell out of you, think about
financial.
Again, it's another lever that we try to pull. So there are clear business reasons as to why you should do cybersecurity. Cybersecurity isn't just a cost center. It's not a cost to be managed.
You can add to the value of your company.
It adds to the value of your organization. Yes.
Yep. Okay. Can't say it any better than that. For those that, like me, who are, wanting to learn more, what does Dom Vogel do to educate himself on cybersecurity, and what would you recommend to the neophyte like myself to get my, to shorten my learning curve? What trade publications, what books, where should I be going to learn more about this?
That's a really, really great question. And the thing that I love about cybersecurity is that I literally have to read. I spend a couple hours reading every day. If I don't, if I miss it, I fall behind. That's what I love about this field. It's not like organic chemistry. You learn that stuff and it's the same, right? I'm literally relearning stuff every day. So to answer your question directly, two of my personal favorites, which I like recommending even to people who know nothing about the field, one is darkreading.com, and the other is csoonline.com. They are really great publications. They're not very techy, or they're not too tech centric, but they really focus on, I think, larger concepts, which for lack of a better term, everyday business layman might be able to better understand. You don't have to be a security nerd to get it, but it really focuses on current trends, security concepts, which, like I said, are more looking at it from a business perspective, rather than, like I said, in the tech weeds. So those are my two go-to sites, and I recommend those on a very frequent basis.
Was the latter one cso.com?
So the second one was csoonline.com. So CSO standing for Chief Security Officer.
Yep. Okay. We'll add those to the show notes. Learned a lot. This is
That's good.
We're going to transition over to the part of the podcast where we get to learn a little bit more about you. Added a couple questions.
Sounds good.
Just for the heck of it. What's your favorite vacation destination?
Oh, that's a good question. I have two young kids, and so my favorite, and I'll use air quotes there, is either Disneyland or Disney World. My kids and my wife absolutely love going there. I go for the nice weather.
Disneyland.
Yes.
I've taken my kid to Disneyland lots of times, and I'll have to say it was most of the time it was very stressful. But we went on a Thanksgiving once.
Ooh,
and there was like nobody there. It was awesome. It was fantastic. It was the best time I ever had with her at an amusement park. So that's a good one.
I'll have to remember that.
Yes, go on a big holiday, because a lot of people aren't going to show up. You are about to get stuck on a desert island. What's one band's music that you would bring with you?
The Beatles. That was my favorite music growing up. That's still my go-to stuff. That stuff is timeless.
Okay, awesome. Can't complain about that. What tools I'm expecting a good answer here. Security professional. What tools or techniques have been most useful to you to be productive and or organized?
Oh, that is I would say my number one technique, which has helped me, is planning my day just before I go to to bed. The day after, I used to be very scattered, and I'd be running all over the place. I'd be missing deadlines. I would just keep notes on pieces of paper. I use Google Calendar religiously, and every night before I go to bed, I check my schedule for tomorrow, and that has just reduced my stress levels. To me, just taking 5 minutes every day to plan out what your next day is going to look like is amazing. So like nothing. I'm sure there's other more tech specific tools, but I have found that practice to be a real lifesaver.
Sometimes simpler is better.
That's right.
Okay. Last question is, what books have been influential in your personal and/or business lives?
Well, I'm a big. There's two books which really had a profound impact on my personal and professional life. The first one would be Million Dollar Consulting by Alan Weiss. I'm a big proponent and believer in terms of how he approaches things.
I got that book somewhere around here. I do. Yeah.
That is my holy Bible, in which I refer to on a frequent basis. Trying to being an entrepreneur and going from sort of a solopreneur aspect to trying to build a sustainable business in terms of how I market myself and personal branding. Reading his book brought me to a spot in which I used to think I was very introverted and just wanted to work the 9 to 5. Reading that book changed my life, and it brought me to doing what I'm doing today. And I love what I do. I've always loved working in cybersecurity, but doing what I do with small and mid-sized businesses is because of the book I read by Alan Weiss. So that's book number one. Book number two is called Hands-Free Mama by Rachel Stafford. I know you're probably thinking, well, mama, I'm not really a mama, I'm more of a papa. But the concept of that book truly changed my life, because I was definitely someone who was always attached to my phone, whether it was texting, whether it was doing stuff for work. I was always looking at my work emails, trying to contact clients. I was literally handcuffed to my phone day in and day out. And the concept of Hands-Free Mama is to, and I encourage all your listeners to read it. It to me was the most profoundly impacting book I've ever read. And I consider myself a voracious reader. It made me realize that the priorities in life are my kids and my wife. There was a sentence in there where the author mentioned how her kids thought that her phone was more important to her than her kids were. And when she would say, I would be on my phone and I would say to my kids, one second, give me a second. And when I read that sentence, it resonated with me, because I still have that. I still say to my kids, if they're asking me something, give me a minute, I'm just finishing something. And I literally sort of dropped the book when I read that. I was like, holy crap. So long story short, it's allowed me to really reprioritize what's truly important in life, and made me realize I do what I do so I can ultimately spend more time with my kids. As much as I love my clients, I don't want to have to spend more time with them than I have to. I do what I do so I can have that time with my children. So it's allowed me to, at 4 o'clock every day, my phone is off. So good luck trying to get me after 4 o'clock Pacific. So I highly encourage your listeners to read it.
Oh, I thank you for that. That is such a positive and upbeat way to end this. It's so true, and I've noticed it as well.
Yeah.
With my kids. So it's a good reminder. I will put all of this information in the show notes. So if you're listening, just pop into the show notes. You don't have to try to memorize this. Stay on the road.
Yes.
If you've learned anything from this particular episode, risk management, go forward, and we can take care of pretty much everything. So this is fantastic. I learned a lot. I hope you'll come back on.
Oh, Nick, I would love to be a recurring guest. Please feel free to have me on anytime. Always enjoy our chats.
Yes. So my guest this week has been Dom Vogel. Dom, thanks again.
Have a good one.